Alright then, main event time. This is the one that most people are looking forward to. Thank you for joining us if you are joining us on YouTube for this video in particular. Our middleweight title is on the line. Israel Adesanya is making his first defense and he is taking on the scariest middleweight of them all, which is Yoel Romero. So the champion is taking on the number 3 seed. Adesanya is a -260 favourite. Yoel Romero comes in at +200. Now 2 years ago, pretty much to the day, Israel Adesanya was stepping into the octagon for the first time to take on Rob Wilkinson. Since then, he has beaten some of the best names when it comes to the middleweight division. Anderson Silva, Kelvin Gastelum, Robert Whittaker. And now he sits here with his record 18-0 and as the champion.
But he's got Yoel Romero to fight. And they're giving him that fight right off the bat. I just think that's such a strange idea that Yoel is getting the first fight. Maybe something was going on with Costa. Maybe that's why they didn't give him that fight. But I feel like maybe that's a bit too early to make the Costa fight. I feel like that could be a great storyline to set up. You could set up a lot of trash talk with that. That'll be 2 young bucks going at it. I feel like it'd be perfect modern day UFC. Like that would be the perfect modern day UFC fight to showcase the modern era, if that makes any sense. Modern era of new and up-and-coming fighters.
Well, all indications were that they were going to give him Costa, but then Costa got an injury, had to pull out. And basically they had the choice between Yoel Romero, again one of the scariest fighters in the division, but a guy who was coming off two losses in a row.
Yes.
Or they were going to give it to Jared Cannonier, who was the informed guy in that division. And I think obviously they went for star power, they went for... Because there is an argument that Romero beat Costa in that fight. So, and I think the UFC is sort of rewarding that. Very similar to Aldo and Cejudo, where they're thinking, yes, even though he lost, even though he's on a losing streak, there was an argument to suggest he won the fight, so we're going to be rewarding that.
Yeah, it looks like modern day UFC, they really stopped looking at just the plain result. They're not really looking just at, oh, he got the win. He gets the next contender shot or the next title eliminator shot or the next title shot. They just look at it as the fight happened. Like they look at the reaction of the fight after it happened, I feel like. Like they did that with the Aldo fight where some people think Aldo could have won that fight. And I feel like Dana's just picking one side and he's going with it. Because he's the one setting up the fights in the end, so...
I think the money side to it is a big factor as well. Because the guys who are getting favoured, despite the losses, are big, popular figures. So you've got, between, say, Jose Aldo and Petr Yan, Aljamain Sterling, Corey Sandhagen, Aldo's the biggest name. So it makes sense for him to headline a pay-per-view, especially in Brazil. And again, in this case, you've either got Yoel Romero... Yes, 2 losses in a row. Or Jared Cannonier, who's still pretty much an unknown to a lot of casuals. Personally, if it was me, I would have gone for Cannonier. I would have rewarded that who would have fought. Because I don't like the idea of guys on losing streaks getting title shots.
Oh, I didn't know you were asking me a question, but yeah, in between those two, I would pick Romero. Really, if I had a gun to my head, I'd pick the Romero fight.
And we will talk about Yoel Romero in a lot more detail. Now, 13-4 record. He has lost 3 out of his past 4, with his only win being Luke Rockhold. A lot of questions about how good of a win that is when we look back on it now. But we can't overlook just how scary this guy is. At 42 years old, the guy is still... the amount of power he carries and the amount of explosivity, he's capable of beating and finishing anyone if he chooses to.
Yeah, I really... Romero, he's a definite strange anomaly. I feel like he's the perfect type of breed for a fighter. Like, I feel like his genetics were just... perfect. Like everything about his body just aligned perfectly for him to be a fighter.
What is it, like 210 pounds and the guy's still doing backflips in skinny jeans?
Yeah, it's crazy at his age, 42, and he's still going.
And when it comes to Romero, we touched on it there. We've got explosive knockout power, Olympic level wrestling. The guy was a silver medalist at the Olympics. But it is strange that even though he does have that in his back pocket, he seldom does use the wrestling, because when he does, as we saw against Lyoto Machida, he can dominate anyone. Because it was just pretty much quick takedown, get you down, ground and pound, done in about 10 seconds.
Yeah, he normally, he always seems to make weight, but apparently, I don't know if you noticed this, but just an article came out 24 minutes ago where he has like 13 pounds to cut in only four days. So we'll have to see if that does any impact on his performance. But in terms of just him generally, yeah, his power is pretty insane. He always seems to go for those huge knockouts in the third round. He's always third round. If you look, every single one of his knockouts are pretty much in the third round. But he doesn't seem to gas out like completely. He's always there, you know. He's not really pulling like a Dada 5000 or anything. Like, he doesn't really fully shut down in later rounds.
To be fair, I have better cardio than Dada 5000.
Yeah, like anybody does, but
I think he fights in a very unusual way as well, because I think he does have a lot of concerns about his cardio, and I think that was one of the things that maybe let him down when he fought Robert Whittaker the first time. So if you watch him during those first few rounds, he doesn't throw all that much. So he waits for rounds 3 and 4, and that's when we see the big explosion. I mean, with the second fight against Whittaker, he hardly threw a strike in the first 2 rounds. Moment he did, in comes round number 3, drops Whittaker, very nearly finishes the fight.
Yeah, his fighting style is sort of similar to Dan Henderson, like later on in his Michael Bisping fight.
The high guard similar to Henderson.
Like, it's very similar, but I feel like Yoel does a bit more. I feel like he does a bit more action. He doesn't really weight as much as Hendo. I feel like Hendo weights a bit too much. In the Bisping fight, I feel like he weighted way too much. I feel like he should have done a bit more action in that fight. But Yoel, he's got smart game plan, in my opinion. It's a good idea to wait until the last final rounds to do something. It's pretty easy to sway judges that way. And he's swaying Dana that way. He got a title fight.
What did you make of his performance against Costa? Because that was, as much as people say it was a fantastic fight, and I still love watching it to this day, it was still a loss.
Yeah.
And what sort of holes does he need to close? What did Costa utilise to get the better of him in that fight?
I feel like maybe in that fight, Costa didn't really, didn't weight as much as his previous opponents. He sort of went for it. He sort of went with his power in that fight. He sort of pushed the pace a little bit, but it was still a good performance from Romero. It wasn't like a terrible performance, like it wasn't a humiliating performance. It's just a loss when you look at it, but still, you can't really give a title shot off of something like that.
But he's taking on the champion Israel Adesanya. As mentioned before, 18-0 record. Came off fantastic showing up against Robert Whittaker at UFC 243. There's a lot of people hyping up this guy. A lot of people saying, dare I say, he's the new Anderson Silva. Is this sort of praise justified?
I feel like you could make an argument for it. You definitely could, because he's got the undefeated record. He's got knockout performances over Brunson and Whittaker. But if you watch the Whittaker fight, I feel like if Whittaker had maybe a better game plan in that fight, he could have probably made it a bit more closer in that fight. Because if you go back and watch it, Robert, he threw a lot of winging shots in that fight. I feel like maybe he knew Adesanya gets pressured. When he gets pressured, he sort of gets hit a little bit. But Robert was forcing it way too much in that fight. He should have mixed up maybe that idea, but with his straight punches. He didn't throw any straight punches in that fight. It was all long winging shots. So I feel like if you have the right game plan about Adesanya, you could beat him. You could possibly beat him.
I think Robert saw the success that Kelvin Gastelum had, because what Kelvin did so well was he waded into the fire and he got Izzy's respect from a very early stage in the first round. And I think Whittaker was trying to do the same thing. And you could argue that Whittaker was winning that first round before the knockdown.
Yeah.
I do love watching Adesanya fight, but I've been very careful not to get too high on the hype train. Because I think as good as his counter-striking is, as good as his kickboxing is, he is vulnerable. He has been caught before. And again, you're fighting a guy who is known for having his knockout power, who could very easily turn the lights out. That being said, though, I think Adesanya's improvements, even in the sort of 2 years he's been in the UFC, he has made considerable improvements in handling, especially the grappling side of the sport. Because if you look at, I think it was his second fight against Marvin Vettori, he had a lot of issues dealing with Vettori's wrestling. And it was a split decision. You can make the argument that Vettori maybe won that fight. But when you go from that fight and then you look at how he improved his takedown defense, against Kelvin Gastelum, and especially against Derek Brunson, he is such a quick learner. And he's, especially from a guy who had zero grappling experience, he has embraced that side of the sport, I think, considerably well.
I definitely think he's improved in his ground game. In the Brunson fight, you could see if you go back and watch it in the first round, Brunson tried to make it a clinch war, but Izzy managed to pull out of it, and he managed to get the knockout in that fight. But Izzy does have problems with big punchers, I feel like. Big punchers. If you go back and watch some of the fights where he's been knocked out in kickboxing, a lot of them were like big punchers that just didn't stop, just kept on going forward. So Yoel's one of those guys. Yoel's one of those guys. Like, we could see Izzy getting hurt in this fight.
There's definitely potential for it. I think that Adesanya is going to try and coax a brawl out of Romero. And I think he's going to try and rely on his counter-striking to get the upper hand. And I say that for two reasons. One, I think Adesanya is confident enough that he can survive the big shots. But also, if he does, he exposes Romero's cardio. Yoel does not like to waste his cardio early. And I think Adesanya is going to try and get that out of him.
And he's held up in 5-round fights. With that Gastelum fight, that was probably his most grueling 5-round fight. He went to a decision with Tavares, right? Correct?
That was a dominant fight as well.
Yeah, that was a very dominant 5-round.
I wasn't too sure about Adesanya after I saw the Vettori fight. Then I saw Tavares and I thought, I think this guy's making a lot of progress. It was the Brunson fight that made me think he's a star. He has the potential to be a champion.
Yeah, definitely the Tavares fight. That's when I started paying attention to Izzy.
And I think there's going to be a lot of people that could be paying attention to Adesanya if he wins this, because we've talked about Zhang Weili and the impact that she could have on the Chinese market. Adesanya could be that next big breakout star the UFC needs. Because we've been needed. Yes, we've got Conor McGregor and we've got Khabib. We're needing more of those figures in MMA right now. Adesanya, because he's a charismatic guy, he's got a flashy style, he's a bit of a trash talker, as many people want to see him lose as they do win. It's that sort of perfect ingredients that you need to be a superstar. But he needs to get through this obstacle, and it is a big obstacle to do so.
I agree with you. Definitely this fight could be the fight that would propel him to that stardom, that marquee name that everybody hears about, like the Connors.
What would seal it, though, is if he could finish Romero. Can he finish Yoel Romero?
I think he could. I definitely think he could. If he does what you think he will do, where he coaxes out the energy in him in the early rounds, I could see him maybe getting a late finish if he manages to get Romero to gas a little bit. I could see him capitalizing. I don't see Izzy standing there letting Romero recover. I could see him definitely pulling one of those Brunson moves where he knocked out Brunson with the switch high kick and the punch. I could see him pulling something like that. So yeah, I could definitely see him knocking out Romero. I don't think out cold fully. I think maybe it'll be a
enough to wobble him
TKO.
and then the ref.
Yeah,
That's it.
like a TKO, something like a Nate Diaz versus Josh Thompson, something like that. I could see it like that.
Just not too early. Just don't get Kevin McDonald to.
Yeah. Do we know the referees?
I don't know it off the top of my head. I would assume they'll stick it to someone quite safe. I can imagine Herb refereeing that one.
Let me look it up. Let me see. Referees and judges select. Oh, I think it's Dan Miragliotta. Yeah, it's Dan Miragliotta. It's Dan.
Where's your money going for this one then?
I'm going with Israel Adesanya on this one.
I'm going to say Adesanya. I don't think he's going to do enough to finish Romero, so I think it's going to be another decision. I think regardless of what happens though, Paulo Costa's getting the winner. And regardless of who fights him, that'll be a barn burner. Because I think Costa has a lot of traits that could give Adesanya a lot of problems, especially that forward pressure.
Yeah, could you imagine 5 rounds of Paulo Costa versus Yoel Romero? There'd be no way that would be a decision. That would be insane. There would be no way that would be a decision. So, yeah, either way, I'm happy with the winner of this fight. Either way.